stop trying to make sense of things in my mind and start trying to make sense of other people's. The skill to believe in yourself when literally nobody else does. There is a belief that I hold that I think has served me more than any other belief that I have.
Hello, everyone. So glad that you've come back for another episode of the What You're About podcast with me, Chad Abood. This is where we break down how inspiring leaders, entrepreneurs, how they've uncovered their natural gifts and they use them to create careers that are more successful and happier, especially in those moments when they felt the pressure to play it safe and follow expectations. And it's the reason why I wanted to start this podcast is because I want us all to have someone that we can look to that maybe feels like us. They have gifts like us. They've gone through challenges like us so that we have the fuel and the inspiration to drive forward when we're in a harder moment. And so today, I think we have an amazing example of what that is. Mando Sallavanti. You know, we all know him from the LinkedIn world. So if you know me, you're definitely already going to know him. Of course, he's a financial planner, but whether it's with MassMutual or whether it's with the story of his journey through athletics, other entrepreneurial journeys, or just you're learning about how to save your money and to spend it more wisely and to invest it. Mondo's doing all those things for us. And so I just wanted to thank you so much for sharing your time. I'm just glad we've exchanged so much over LinkedIn. And so I'm just so glad that we have the time to actually be here together. And thank you, man. And so listen, I just want to dive right into it because I know you're going to have so much to share with everyone. I want to uncover like what you're about and the journey of how you got there. So I know you're a big sports guy growing up. Maybe that was always part of your journey. Maybe it wasn't. But can you take us back to what were some of the earliest goals or ideas that you had for yourself about what the future might look like?
It's a really good question. I don't even think I've ever been asked that nor thought about it. But first goals, I think of high school football, playing high school football and just thinking I would do anything to be able to play football in college. And I didn't care what level it was at. Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, I didn't care. Ultimately, I ended up playing at a Division 3 smaller school and it was an amazing experience, but that was probably the first thing I had my eyes set on and how could I turn that into a professional football career? Now, Chad, I'm 5'10". I wasn't the fastest guy in the world. I wasn't going to the NFL. That was never in the cards. But I was looking at some leagues over in Europe. I have friends that went over there and played in Finland, in Germany, and it's a pretty good life. And you get to live in Europe and experience a lot. So I had on my radar turning football into that career and maybe parlaying playing over there to getting to even the CFL in Canada potentially, which is another very respectable league. And that was probably the first thing on my mind when you think about my initial dreams for growing up and going into a career.
Hey man, the Argonauts would have been lucky to have you, buddy. I wish we could have that part of the story. But I also know from what you shared that part of that was also made not as possible for you as you might have wanted, whether it's through injury or the struggle. And, like I played college sports too. So, I know that journey, but I also know for anyone that's listening, whether it's sports or something else, there can be some devastating moments that create a big like chasm in between our expectation and what the reality feels like in that moment. And so when you're someone like yourself, clearly very driven and dedicated to football, but for anyone who's dedicated to a specific thing, and then there's a big shock to the system, like what was going through your mind around that time about like, I was planning on playing football in Europe or in Canada and like, but now it's going to be something totally different. So what was going through your mind at that time?
So my last season, which was in 2019, was supposed to be my junior year, and I had a shoulder injury. I tore my labrum. I had to get major reconstructive surgery on it and whatnot. I recovered fully in 4 months, and the doctor had said it could have been as long as 12 to 18 months. They were even ruling out that I wouldn't have been able to play my next season, even with the surgery. Just to paint a picture of how dramatic and how big of a deal it was. So I recovered and I started working out again within 4 months. I got back to what I would consider football shape by 6 months, and this would be June of 2020. In June of 2020, this is right in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and I was slated to go back to school in August to start our fall camp for our 2020 season. July comes, they cancel our season because of COVID. So our season was canceled. We didn't play that year. And really, I was left with a decision to either go back to school for a sixth year, because it would have been my fourth year and a half in one semester. So I would have had to go back to school for a sixth year, or really I could do something that just totally changed the trajectory that I laid out for my life. Ultimately, that's what I did. So I had a lot of guidance from my parents, a lot of guidance from a mentor of mine, Timmy, who's now one of my partners, Timmy Lavelle. And you know what, man? I looked at it like this. If I go back to school and I play another season, one, I'm risking injury. Two, I now have to pay for more school. So I'm going to have to take out some debt, which I'm the luckiest kid in the world. My parents paid for my undergrad, but if I went back, they made it very clear I was going to be the one paying for it. And if I went back, foregone a year of making income, which money isn't everything, but when you take, okay, now I have loans, now I give up this income I could make for the next year. And what if I hurt this shoulder again? I decided that, just weighing the risk and reward, I wanted to go into my career as a financial planner, and that's ultimately what I decided to do.
You're already financial planning even when you're an undergrad. You're looking at that opportunity cost of the university versus how much money can I make. But I think also in between, from what I've read about your story, is that there was also an entrepreneurial bit there too, where you were like, okay, well, what are kind of my interests? And I'm curious, like I think there was like a sneaker piece there and there was like a reseller side. And so what was going on in you? Like you had this thing, because I know I was very dedicated to sports too. And I don't know about for you, but for me, I almost felt like I was on autopilot sometimes. Like your training is so regimented. You're thinking about the next game, the next match, the next team to beat, the next school to try to impress, like all this stuff. Were you thinking deeply about like, this is what I'm naturally great at, this is what I naturally love? Or was it a bit more of, I'm clearly a good athlete and I'm very good at football and I'm a dedicated guy? Like, where were you on the continuum of like the thoughtfulness of like your natural gifts versus like, you're clearly a good athlete and we're trained to be great at football?
What's funny is what I'm doing now in my career. I don't think I ever considered the major skills I have to be things that I'm naturally good at. And they very much so were developed, most of them. But what wasn't developed, and what always held true with myself, was discipline. And that goes back as long as I can remember. I feel that I'm significantly more naturally disciplined than the average person is. So let me give you an example. With football, working out and eating healthy and doing all those things to be an optimal athlete, I never complained about that. Like, that was fun for me. I liked doing those things. I never had issues with it. And when it came time, like throughout that journey, and in 2020, one thing I did gloss over, and I'm glad you brought it up, was about sneaker reselling. I was home from school because of the pandemic. They had sent us home, and my best friend, he's going to be the best man in my wedding in a couple of years. He was reselling sneakers, and we grew up and we collected them. So like this sneaker over my shoulder, like that's a rare sneaker that we would be trying to collect. And I display this because as a kid growing up, this was one that I dreamed of getting, that I never could. But back to the story, he was reselling sneakers before the pandemic. He was succeeding, getting traction. And I said to him, when I was sitting home bored, and I remember I think it was Easter, and we were eating Easter dinner, and I texted him, and I'm like, because I saw an Instagram post of his, I said, "Dude, are you really making money doing this? Like, is there actually like opportunity here? Because we've been collecting sneakers our whole life." And him being my best friend, I said to him, "I know more about sneakers than you. At best, we know equal about sneakers. So I could probably do this, but I don't want to step on your toes." Credit to him. Credit to him, though. He says, "Dude, we could all win. Let's do it. You could get into this." So I did. And throughout that journey of recovering and coming back from football, I started reselling sneakers and built up an account on Instagram and was shipping shoes all over the world. And that was one of those things where I think my discipline came back into play, because it took discipline to learn, like, what does a business cycle look like? What actions need to be taken? What do you need to do to provide customer service? So through that journey, I think I developed the natural abilities, I guess you will, that I now use as a financial planner, because I learned customer service. I learned dealing with people. I learned running the business.
I love that, man. I love that look back too, because like the truth feels so obvious when we look back, right? Like in the moment, sometimes it can feel a bit opaque. Like, where's it going? What does it all mean? But when you look back, these themes have always been there. And you know what else I also notice in you? Like, you're a curious guy, and you're a guy that likes to like spread a lot of positive energy to other people. And I'm curious, like, were those things like part of your youth too? Like when you look back, were you always kind of a curious guy and someone who's always like building groups together? Because like I get that from you.
Yeah, for sure. That's a really interesting thing to articulate that I don't think I ever have about myself, but it's spot on. And I think it does go back to sports. I know we're talking a lot about sports in this conversation, but I was a captain on pretty much every team I played for, and I was always a guy that seemed to be able to get people to come together. At the same time, I look at sports, and I was the same guy that people would be getting mad at, and they didn't like that he held them accountable. But what I was able to do with holding people accountable was get results, and ultimately get us to be better than we were. And I think that does stem from sports when you talk about bringing people together naturally, and spreading positive energy rather than being the person that's bringing energy out of a room.
I mean, I felt that from you ever since you've that we've come across each other on LinkedIn, how you do that. And so one thing that I share a lot with people, whether it's like coaching or consulting, is that typically your natural gifts, these are not new things. Like these are things that have always been with you. And one of the reasons why you're so great at them is because they're easy for you. You think about them a lot on your own. You probably read books about them. You like have conversations about them. And all those things actually continue to make you better at them because you're just doing them all the time because you love it versus things that are harder for us. So we shy away from it. Well, that actually prevents us from getting better at those things. And so you're a curious guy. You clearly bring people together. You're obviously a very disciplined guy. And so so you move through this phase where you're like, all right, well, I'm not playing in Finland. I'm not going to be playing in the CFL. My friend's making money doing this. I'm now making money doing this. And it was clearly a passion of yours. So what happened then to like make the pivot more into financial planning when clearly from where it's going at that moment, it felt like that could have been a cool business for you?
The thing with sneaker reselling, I didn't see it as scalable. I was scaling the business, but for perspective, I was probably at my peak, and I stopped doing it truly at my peak. I sold like 105 pairs my last month doing it. So you're talking 4 pairs a day. And that was at my peak. And then after I sold my last pair, I just stopped. Like I just stopped buying more and flipping at a point, because I knew I was coming into financial planning. So let's rewind a little bit though, because I think this will make sense why. When I went into college, football was always on my mind, but I also had an awareness that playing professional football is few and far between when you look at the population of people that play football. I need to also have a traditional career path lined up. My father's a family doctor. He was my first hero. I wanted to be him growing up. So I went to school pre med. And to the point that people knew I was always going to go pre-med to college and hopefully go into med school and become a doctor. My nickname is Doc. My friends call me Doc. My best friend calls me Doc. They all call me that to this day. Literally. I saw my football coach from high school the other day. He's like, "What's up, Doc?" Like that's just what people call me. So that's how ingrained it was in my life. But in college, as I'm going through this football journey and as I was doing that, I realized that it wasn't for me. And one thing that my dad did for me is probably the most impactful thing someone's done for me because it's led to where I am today. He started setting me up on networking calls with other professionals. The second call that I made was to his financial advisor. And on that call, his financial advisor was who I mentioned before, my mentor, Timmy, who I'm now partners with. He's one of my three partners. Timmy basically told me a story of a client of his, two clients of his. They're a married couple. One of them passed away, and the wife called him because your financial advisor, when someone passes away, there's a lot of money moving around and you have to do things with the family, for those of you who don't know. So he goes over the house, and it's really that scene where someone passes, everyone's there grieving, there's food baskets and whatnot, and Timmy's going to help them get the money in order, and the wife pulls him in another room. And she's telling him the effect he's had on their family. And she says, "Timmy, there's three things we all think about before we go to bed." And at this point, when I'm talking to Timmy, he's now telling it to me outside of the story, but he's saying, "Mando, there's three things we think about. Did I hurt someone today? Am I healthy? And are my friends and family healthy? And the third thing we think about just before we go to sleep, just before our eyes shut, am I going to be able to pay my bills tomorrow? Am I making the right financial decisions?" And Timmy positioned it to me that this career, you become the third thing people think about before they go to bed. And when he told me that story, I realized that my father was the second thing people think about, because if they're not healthy, they're going to call their doctor. And if their money's not in order or they have a money decision on their mind, they're going to call Timmy. Now they call me. And when I heard that, man, it just shifted everything for me on what I wanted to do with my life.
You know what I love about that? It's such a great story, is because like you can see the value underpinning between your dad's life and what you know, saw him as a hero and how you valued it. But then in terms of like your actual inclination and a specific skill set, it was a little bit different, but the value underpinning was the same. It's like help people reduce their stress, allow them to make, you know, good decisions for their family and for their community. And so it's funny because the value proposition ended up being so similar, even though the deployment of your specific skills and interests are different. And so, you know, it must be a beautiful thing to feel like you're still honoring that feeling of Doc that you had growing up, because you're doing it just in a slightly different way. But that's a beautiful thing. And so you're going through this journey where you're saying like, okay, sneaker reselling, that's not going to be the future. Football's not going to be the future. You're having these conversations, you get this inspiration. And as you started building that journey, were you thinking to yourself like, okay, so I'm disciplined, I'm curious, I bring people together, this is how I'm going to do it? Or were you thinking more traditionally like, okay, build the skills and start helping people make money and make good decisions, and that'll be its own thing? Because I'm curious how you started using these gifts that have just exploded, you know, on LinkedIn and of course like with your clients. I'm curious how that journey started.
I don't think there was any intentionality about it. I think I think it was this. And you mentioned curiosity. That's spot on. There is a belief that I hold that I think has served me more than any other belief that I have. I don't know what I don't know. Keeping that in my mind has let me get so much that I otherwise would not have. So let me explain, and let me just illustrate a point. I have something in me that when I'm exposed to new information and I think it's something that can improve my life, I am the person that will literally take that and implement it immediately, and I will not even think. I won't research, I won't bounce it off someone, I won't do anything. If I think that it's the right move, I act, and I take action very quickly. Why I think that's so good, I think I'm so quick with doing that that even when I fail, people don't see the failures because I'm taking so much action that the next action will prevail over the past one, if that makes sense and you're following me. So what was happening, I started reading books and listening to podcasts, and I had my mentor Timmy. But throughout that time, from the first time I talked to Timmy and the first book I read to getting into the career and learning at masterminds and workshops and webinars and conferences and all of these events and things I could learn at, it was just one combination of here's this new idea, what's the action I can take on it, and then learn from the action I take on it if there's a failure associated, and repeating that process over and over.
And that's actually, it's a really good reflection of what you're great at, man, because you're a curious guy and so you're always trying to look for something new, and you're also very disciplined. And so you push that action, and that discipline probably overrides a lot of the fear because you're so driven by the discipline and the curiosity that, I mean, sure. I want to hear about this from you. I'm sure there's things that you're like, wow, this is like outside of my comfort zone. But what strikes me about you is that the curiosity and discipline are such strong traits that they might drown out or like mitigate the fear noise a bit because you're so driven by it. And so I'm curious, as you're like building this, much more like corporate career than I imagine anything you had imagined for 20 something years of your life. What were some of the hardest parts as you were like trying to build this like new technical skill set, meeting a whole new network of people? Like, what were some of the things that felt really hard that you had to overcome?
By far the hardest thing for me was learning the soft skills, as people call them in business. And that might sound funny coming from me because I think I've gotten pretty good at them now, but I'm an analytical person, believe it or not. Like, I'm very analytical. Numbers make sense to me. I put everything into data and I regurgitate data, and that's how I make sense of the world. If 1 plus 1 equals 2, how does 2 plus 2 equals 4? Like, that is how I think. But when I got in business, my mentor Timmy, who I keep bringing up, Timmy is the complete opposite. If there could be an opposite, he is the opposite, and that's why we work very well together because we complement each other. The first thing he taught me when I got in business was to stop trying to make sense of things in my mind and start trying to make sense of other people so you can make sense of things in their mind, and understanding the way other people think before I try to impose how I think. Because a big mistake I was making early on, no matter who was in front of me, and speaking about a client I was working with, no matter who was in front of me, I was trying to impose an analytical mindset on them, but they might have been someone who needed a different type of approach. And learning that was probably the hardest thing for me. At the same time, easily one of the most valuable.
And so I think it's such great advice because I'm a former general counsel, lawyer, so I think about that a lot because nobody really cares about the law other than lawyers. You're like helping business people run businesses or helping functions like drive towards their goals. And what I learned over time is like so similar to that great advice you had, which is nobody cares necessarily about what you care about. Doesn't mean they don't want your advice and your counsel and your guidance, but figuring out what matters to them, that's the unlock, right? Because everyone's got their own stressors, their own goals, and they might make sense to you, they might not. That's not really for you to worry about. What you need to do is like understand what people care about, why they care about it, make sure you understand that and can validate that yourself, and then try to elevate those goals and reduce their stresses to the best that you can because everyone's got their own life journey. And not everyone needs to feel the way that I feel or the way that you feel or anyone that's listening. It's really about understanding someone else's mindset. So when you're explaining that advice, I was thinking like, it's so great. And it's funny, I bet you so many people who know you from LinkedIn and not personally would be really surprised to hear how analytical you are, as you feel as a person, of course, in your job, but because you're so personable on LinkedIn. And so was it the discipline and the curiosity of building a brand that really pushed you there? Or was it your partner? Or like, what was it that, this friendly, curious, very confident guy on LinkedIn, where did that come from?
It's a good question. I've said that a couple times today, but it is. I think it stems from football because in football, I I always felt this thing inside of me that I could see things other people can't see. Like I feel that I'm very aware of situations, and it started in football when I started to realize this. But I wanted to be able to. I guess you could say I wanted to help other people be better for our team through that. And leadership was the way to do that. So coming into a leadership role was where I got to. And again, I don't think it was natural, but just I think if you do something enough, you get enough reps, you get good at something over time. And it's such a simple lesson, right? It really is. And we always hear that. If you want to get better at something, do it more. 10,000 hours. You hear about that all the time. That's probably where it started for me. And then getting in business, I think it just developed when, I mean, Chad, I've had every year I've been in business probably 500 plus client meetings per year. So when you talk about 500 plus hours that I'm face to face speaking one on one with someone, trying to understand them, trying to build rapport, trying to find common ground with a client so that I could help them improve their life, it starts to become natural.
I totally get that. And so here's the part where I'm curious is because there's the idea that if I just go out and dig holes to plant a tree 1,000 times, I'll be better at it. But my motivation to do it changes whether I care about planting trees or not. And so, yeah, you've been doing, you post like every day, sometimes multiple times a day. Clearly, you've built a big following, you become very confident, you're very disciplined. But what was the motivation for you? For anyone that's listening, that's saying, like, yeah, man, Mando, but like, I don't really want to do that beyond just doing it. What were you tapping into that allowed you to build this thing the way that you have?
Initially, what I was tapping into, and this is a little bit vulnerable, but growing up being a doctor's son, you get told you're daddy's boy and you have the silver spoon every day. Maybe not every day, but consistently every week or every month. And anything good you do, you get told that. And subconsciously, when I decided I didn't want to be a doctor, I think part of it was because I wanted to break free from that path and blaze my own, so to speak. And when I got into financial advising, I saw that as a way that I could do that and not be told that I'm daddy's boy, so to speak. So going through that and now becoming a financial advisor, I was struggling early on and sticking through that struggle to learn what I needed to learn to best be a financial advisor for my clients and grow that business to be financially successful and help other people. I think that was the first driving factor. Now I'm not driven by that anymore. I don't resent anyone that ever looked at me that way or said that to me because I know it's generalizing and I get it. But now it's more so it's fear, honestly, and fear not in the way you think, but I have this probably irrational fear to live the same life as billions of other people walking the planet. Because in my mind, and this isn't to speak bad about anyone else, it's just a generalization I have and a belief that I hold. I believe that the billions of people on our planet live the same life, obviously different lives, but I believe that they're living very similar lives through the same process, if you will. And I have a fear in the back of my mind that drives nearly every decision I make to not live that same life.
I mean, it resonates so much because I have this fear that if someone tells me the city that I'm going to pass away in, I don't want to know. Like I've lived in different cities, but and I love Toronto, but I don't want anyone to tell me like, hey man, when you close your eyes for the long sleep, X number of years from now, this is going to be the place, because I want to feel the agency of choice and a unique life that's like very meaningful to me. And so that really resonates, man, about like feeling like you want to have the agency. And it could be that you're going to stay like in the city, in the job where it is, but you want to feel like every day you're making a choice. And that was very similar for me about why I left like a great job, and like everything looked great, from the outsider's perspective. You're general counsel of this international company, like it's so great. Like, why would you ever want to leave that to then build your own thing? And I think a lot of it is very similar to what you said. It's like, I truly believe that we all have our own individual specific gifts. I want to actually use mine and live that every day and see what I can make of it. It's like really, it drives me every day. So I totally get that, man. Now I'm curious, what did your dad and your mom say when like this path that they thought you were going on, that you had probably talked about over dinners many, many times, and then it pivoted and now you've got the LinkedIn thing and you're building this other life? Like, what was their reaction during that process?
I think my dad actually had a sense of relief, and I've never really asked him what his opinion was, but I think he had a sense of relief because he has told me stories when he went through medical school and his journey to become a doctor. And I can remember him telling me literally wake up, eat breakfast, go to the bathroom, study, eat, go to the bathroom, go to sleep. And that was life. Like I can remember him telling me this. And one of the things he did say when I did want to change, he said, you know what, honestly, it's so much more competitive today, more than ever, to become a doctor and get into medical school and score well on the MCATs. The MCATs are a test you have to take for medical school or after, I forget when it is. But, anyways, that talking through some of those things like that, I think he had a sense of relief. And my parents were very supportive. They never questioned me. And it's probably one of the best things they've done for me, especially when I wanted to start sneaker reselling. Because what I didn't talk about with that, when I graduated high school, you get money from people and as a graduation gift, and you get money from birthdays throughout the year growing up as a kid. I had a savings account probably with, I don't know, $5,000. Like not a lot of money, but for a college kid, $5,000 is a lot of money. I and I don't know if my parents did this at the time, but I emptied that out to just purchase sneakers and resell them. And I did I it worked out and I built up some money. But I give you that example because my parents never questioned me. They always supported me, and I think they saw something in me. You go back to discipline and just being able to take action and learn. I think they saw that in me because when I would want to take risks, the conversation always ended with, "You're sure this is what you want to do?" And if I gave them that yes, it was always okay. There was never questioning beyond that.
Yeah, that sense of someone seeing you for what you're passionate about, your gifts, what you want to bring to it. Like, I actually think that's one of the most like connecting things that any two humans can do, is like your parents or your friends or your spouse, whatever, like seeing you for like, okay, I don't know how this is going to play out, but clearly you care about it. Clearly you've made some sort of initial plan of how you're going to get there and it matters to you. And if it matters to you, then that's what I believe in. And I think that, you've been talking a little bit about this throughout, which is like what I call like the inputs versus outputs model. you know, what I've really come to believe in is like what matters is the inputs. Like for you, you're a curious guy. You'd like to bring people together. You're very disciplined. Those are like the assets that drive your life. Now, whether that's sport, some entrepreneurial business, whether it's financial advising, whether it's anything else in the future, like all those things are just outputs of those like core gifts that you have. And I've really tried to turn my attention and energy to the gifts, because what I find is the opportunities kind of reveal themselves, and they're like way broader than I could ever have conjured up on my own. But when I focus my attention on my gifts and push that out into the world, people find you and they say like, "Hey Mando, do you want to do this together? Have you ever thought about this?" But if we have to pre-know the solution, I'm going to be a doctor. Well, it's like a much more limited, outcome than what the world could offer you. And whether some of that's come organically to you through your discipline, through your effort, through your curiosity, I think you're living that. And through LinkedIn, now you've just built this place where people kind of feel like it's home with you, like financial advice, guidance, like, well, that's where they go when they're trying to learn stuff. And I think that's very impactful. Like beyond the actual business, you're just making people's lives better at scale because you're reaching thousands and thousands and thousands of people every day. And so how do you think about that as your business continues to grow? Like, where is your mind going on how do I continue using these natural gifts to like push to the next level? Where's your mind at these days?
My long-term vision is to ultimately build something where I have my team now. We keep gaining clients, we keep scaling. As we scale, we're going to need to bring other advisors in to keep the level of service and care that our clients need. That's no question about that because we want to scale. I envision a future where in bringing in new advisors, my philosophies in financial planning, how I'm helping my clients are instilled with them and trained with them to then help more people and continue to grow that out. And I think about Dave Ramsey. I don't necessarily co-sign a lot of Dave Ramsey's financial advice, but what I can say with Dave Ramsey is he is an incredible businessman that has built out something to impact more people financially than maybe anybody ever because of the way that he's done it. And the way that he's done it is instilled certain financial principles into the people of his company who then go and directly impact people on a financial level. So again, as a financial advisor, and if you know anything about the financial advisor community, almost all of them don't like a lot of Dave Ramsey's advice. But I look up to Dave Ramsey a lot from the way he's done things in that way because I truly think it's the way you can impact the most people at scale.
Well, I mean, I think it's without doubt that like you're already doing it and you'll continue to do it because I think that that's what's in you. Like you're a curious guy, you like helping people find the best in themselves, you like, just like the football analogy about helping people play their best. That's what you're doing for people just in a money game now instead of in a football game. And so, I've no doubt that that's going to be your future in whatever path you take it. And so, I guess the last piece for everyone that's listening is if you're going to talk to, your younger self or someone else who feels like, okay, I know a little bit about myself, but I don't exactly know where it's going. And I don't really know how to take it to that next step. Like, what would you have told your younger self or that person who's kind of struggling to figure out, like, how do I use my gifts? How do I make a career that makes more sense for me?
I think you need to develop the skill, and this is a skill in my mind, the skill to believe in yourself when literally nobody else does. Because even though I look back and feel that my parents were extremely supportive and always were there for me and they always supported me, in the back of my mind, going through a lot of the times where I was struggling, I did feel like there was nobody looking at me that I was going to succeed. And it was one of those things of like, well, Mondo's disciplined and he works hard, so we'll support him, but we'll see what happens. And I was able to see a bigger vision for myself when I had no evidence to actually see that vision. So thinking long and hard about where you see your life going, why you see it going there, and most importantly, why you want that is the best advice I could give to my younger self or someone else to have, because a lot of times we're given goals and we're given a path by people that is just because it's quote unquote good. We're not given that because it's what we want. So stop and ask yourself what you want, why you want it, and how you're going, not even necessarily how you're going to get there, but just acknowledging what you want, but acknowledging why you want it. Because you don't want to be going after something that was given to you by your family, your friends, social media, a company you work for. That's a path that's only going to lead you to burnout.
It's incredible advice, man. Like the why matters so much, and sometimes you have to ask yourself, like a few times, you have to ask why, because our initial inclination can be like a very superficial answer. Oh, to make money. Oh, to have security. Oh, to like buy things. But like, why do you care about that? Why do you care about that? And when you keep going down like a few whys, you start to really feel a lot closer to yourself. And so I think that's incredible advice, because when you get to that place where you know like a core driver about why you're pursuing something, like for me, it intrinsically matters to me that other people have the tools and tactics and inspiration to find their gifts. Like I just care about it so much because I believe that's my impact that I'm meant to make. And so no matter what happens as the outcome, I'm always happy. I always feel like I'm on the right path because that's what I know I'm meant to give. But that's from taking your advice, in another kind of stream of my own life, and asking myself why. Like, why do you care about that? Why do you care about that? Because it drives you when nobody else is pushing you or when you don't feel the obligation. It drives you on its own. And so that's incredible advice, man. And thank you so much. And I just wanted to say, like, just appreciate everything that you give to people. You're such a great example of something that I tell people all the time, which is like, if you want to build something, give first. Don't wait for somebody to give it to you. Just go give it. So you want to build, like in your case, financial advisor career and a business and scale it. Well, then give that advice every day and keep giving it. And if anyone wants an example of how that ends up playing out, then just go follow Mando. Like, go to LinkedIn, you'll see him there, and you'll see how he's giving that advice every day and encouraging people to be smarter. And I think that that's just a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then they feel like, well, you're the first person that comes to their mind, just like it was for me when I connected you to our other friend, Owen McGran. Like, you just come to mind because you gave first, man. So I just want to thank you so much. I learned so much. It was beautiful learning a lot more about you too from your story. And I know that everyone that's listening to this will feel that too. And whether it was like in the car, working out, wherever you were that you heard this, I hope that you took the inspiration from Mondo's story, you took the tactics that he shared, and whether it's for you or you think it would resonate with a friend, like I hope that you share it with them and let us know how this helped you. We'll be posting it. You can drop a link, you can drop the comment, like let us know if you have questions. Mondo's going to be one of the friendliest people you're going to meet. So make sure that you reach out to him. So thank you, my friend, for sharing your time with us today.
Thank you, brother. And I want to make one more point to close this out real quick off of the self. You mentioned the self, it becomes a self fulfilling prophecy. One of the things I think of in my mind, what are the actions I can take that if I do them over and over long enough and consistent enough that it becomes unreasonable that I will not get this picture that I'm painting in my minds for myself? So I had this to slip that in before we finish because it's just a very strong belief that I hold. And I think the way you ended our conversation today, it's very fitting. And thank you again, brother. Really enjoyed this. Glad we got to finally connect. And hopefully this was helpful for anyone listening.
Oh, no doubt it was, man. That's a beautiful ending. Thank you for that. And for everyone, wishing you incredible rest of your day.